No.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new IPy notebook file. If you're unfamiliar in this process, I will have some videos linked down below, but we're just going to create a new IPy notebook and get started. So before we even start, I just want everyone to have an understanding of where this version of the course is going to take us. And I know I was just talking about Tesla. This is essentially the part. I am not actually touching the computer. Essentially what it's doing is it is learning every little detail about this environment. How it's doing that is this process called Q-learning. We'll get into that. And then eventually what we will do is actually model Q-learning with a neural network. That is why you should stick around to the end of this course. I'm going to walk everybody through until that point. So if this interests you, make sure to stick around to the end. Okay, so what is programming and what do we need in order to actually write a computer program, right? What does it even mean to write a computer program, you might even ask? Well, there's a few things, and Python makes this really easy. You really just need to have some statements, right? A statement is anything like print. I'm just going to print out something random. I am a snake in honor of our snake game. Let us see that print out. It takes a really long time to load. But basic program, basically the hello world version of our little course. And really, there's a lot going on here in the sense that there's a lot that you don't have to really worry about in order for this to work, right? Our code that we're putting in here is just taking these values and displaying them here. Super basic. Let's start with variables. You might wonder, what is a variable? Well, there's two types of variables that we're going to talk about. There's the regular variables, which are the things that you just set equal to something. And then there's the other type, which you're also setting equal, but they never change, right? So right off the bat, what I want all of you to understand is that we'll have two types, right? This is going to be type change. I'm going to say I am a snake. And then not changing is equal to I'm actually a person. All right, so because we have a nice IDE, it's going to basically show us a distinction between these two. But what's really going on here is we have our variable, right? This is a variable. And then our constant, right? If we hover over this, it should tell us that this is a constant, which means it is not going to change throughout our program, right? Real quickly, let's just go over how to even create any type of variable, right? We have some name, right? And this name could be literally anything. I can name this literally anything, right? Still works. Why? Well, because this is not a variable in the sense that it has to have some specific name. It's just a reference for you as the programmer. You get to decide what your variables take name, what they do, what values they could even take on, and your program basically dictates all of that. Well, great. How do we actually do that? Well, let me just put that back. Well, let me just say changing is equal to changing. And then we're going to add a little piece of this string on and we're just going to say, right? And then actually what we could do too is just display changing, right? So here you can see changing was I am a snake, right? That's where this part comes from, right? But then what we went and done down here is we actually modified it here and added a little piece of to it, right? What's the point of this? Well, you could think of this as, well, if I have some sort of name, right? Let's say I want to change the name of my profile on YouTube or TikTok or whatever platform you care about, right? I could modify my name through some sort of interaction of the program. Well, that's not really too important right now. We're not really talking about that. But the fact that I could change something throughout my program is super important, right? We used this little plus operator. Operators in Python essentially dictate what actually ends up here, right? If I said minus, this is not going to let me do that. It's actually going to say you can't actually subtract two things like that. But if I were to change this to numbers, it would let me do that. Wait a second. Okay. So before we go into there, let's actually finish our understanding of what we have going on here, right? So we have this string, right? Notice how I'm saying what this is. It's a string, and you could consider a string just a sequence of characters, right? I space A M space A space snake, right? It's a sequence of characters. The order of the characters are described based on how I input the string, right? That's probably pretty simple to understand. But then down here, right, we're adding more characters to this sequence of characters, right? We're taking all of these characters and basically adding this sequence and this sequence of characters and then coming up with a new sequence. There's a lot going on here in the sense that for someone who's just looking at this, it might make sense at first pretty well of what should happen, right? It just kind of makes sense that if I take this and add this to the back of it, I should get this, right? There's a lot under the hood that is really important for you to understand right now, and that goes between these, right? What these are doing is they're modifying or they're coming up with a new representation of what both of these mean, right? And it's storing that here, right? I'm taking this little piece here, coming up with some sort of modification here, and then connecting two things together using it, right? That's going to output this new thing here, right? If I just do this and get rid of that equals sign, right? It's still gonna stay the same as it was here. But because I changed the value using this equal sign, right? That equal sign basically takes whatever is here and puts it into this. Because I did that, it is now going to change the value, and therefore I will now have a new value for changing, right? Okay, well, where was I trying to go with this? What I wanted you to understand is essentially that we could have some sort of variable, give it some sort of value, right? Not too explicit in what values are yet, but that's where we're going. But really, we could really do anything with these values as long as there's a way to do them, right? There's this addition that we did between this value and got this new value. We could even do this with not changing and get a similar result, right? I am a snake, I am actually a person, right? That kind of intuitively makes sense off the bat. If I were to take these two, squish them together, I would end up with this, right? That's really what this is doing, right? So another use case you could think of for just this alone is, let's say you have a first name, and I'm going to set that equal to John, and then a last name equal to Doe. One thing I will note is that these little things right here, these kind of, whoa, completely forgot what those are called for a second. Complete brain fart. Quotation marks. Jeez. It doesn't really matter if I use these quotation marks or these quotation marks, right? What matters is that whatever goes here is inside of these quotation marks, kind of like that. So if I just type some other value here, right? If I just get rid of John, it's not gonna like that. That makes me think that I'm setting it equal to a value. So this would work if I put changing here, because I have a variable here named changing, right? But the computer kind of sees a difference between this and something like this based on these quotation marks. So let's change this back to John and our other last name, Doe. Now let's just print these two together, right? We're going to say first name plus last name. Printing just puts it out here. And we're just going to put these two things inside of there with this little addition operator in between them. Like I said, what this is going to do is it's going to take both of those values and then do something to get them into one value, right? We're taking two values. It's kind of like if I have 5 plus 2, right? I have 5, I have 2, I add them together, I get 7, right? Super basic concept, but super powerful. We can't forget about how powerful this is, because now what I could even do even like further is I could, let me just copy this line. I'm going to comment that out. I'm also going to put that here. And then let's say we wanted some formatting, right? Let's get some formatting into this string. Now we have a little space between John and Doe. Great. My name is not John Doe. My name is John Coke. This is telling me my name is John Doe. So let's change that. How are we going to change that, right? Well, one of the first things that we said about variables is that if it is a variable, then it could change, right? So let's introduce that concept again, because I know we already did that. We did that up here. But now let's change it based on what I want it to be. I'm going to type in my name to this program, right? It's not going to change the first name, it'll change the last name. So let's just do this. First name, and then let's also do last name is equal to input, and we're going to say last name. And now let's run this, but also put this down here. I just copy and pasted that down here. And then before we actually print this, we're going to come up with a new string, and we're going to say my actual name is, and we're going to add that to there. I know I put that little comma. It'll do the same thing as this, but it'll just put that space there. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to put the space there, less confusing because we already started adding things together. We don't really need to go on to other things yet, but what we should see is this little thing pop up here, right? You might, if you're running this in just a normal Python file, then this will pop up inside of the console and it'll be asking you to enter something. I'm going to tell it my name is John, just like the program had, but then my last name is Coke. It's not Doe. And then right here, it's going to say my actual name is John Coke, right? What are we dealing with here? Because I kind of said some stuff before, and that stuff was involved with types of variables. What is a type? Well, if we have the type of changing, right, let's just output type of changing, just so we could see what we're dealing with. str, well, you could think of a stir, or string, or stir for short. I don't know why they call it stir. You could think of that as a sequence of characters, right? It doesn't really matter what that sequence of characters is. It's just any sequence of characters. Those characters are anything really on your keyboard, plus a couple more that we'll talk more about in a later episode. But it is a stir. What does that do for us? Well, that tells me this. Changing has all sorts of things associated with it. I could see these kind of here, right? there's all of these sub-properties that a str would have. Those being, maybe you want to capitalize a string. Let's do that. Let's capitalize. It was already capitalized. Now I'm realizing, I took a second there. I was like, wait, why didn't I didn't mean to capitalize. If I changed that actually to an I would have seen it change, but I didn't. That's kind of what that was doing. It was just capitalizing the first letter. But now what we can do is we could just uppercase everything in that string, or lowercase everything in that string. You might ask, what is this useful for? Let's say you have the name of somebody and you're looking for that name somewhere inside of the followers, right? You're going through all your followers. If I lowercase everybody's name, then I'm no longer checking to see if the cases match, right? I'm no longer going to see if you capitalize the J or the P or the L in your name when I'm looking for you, because I don't really care about whether or not the L in your name was uppercase. I care about if the names match, or at least match up to a certain degree. That's kind of what this would be useful for. Really, what I want you to understand here is not that we have all of these and how to use them. What I really want you to understand is that the string has some of these properties associated with it, right? Off the bat. So let's just make a note here. Strings, sequence of characters. These characters, these sequences have some specific properties. One that we will use right now, real quickly, just to demonstrate, is the length property. One of the things I might want to know is how long a string is, right? Let's just do that real quick. It's 34 characters long. That tells me that if I actually took the string, it is 34 characters wide, right? Why is that useful? We will go into that a lot more. Maybe you could think of a reason. If you can, that would be cool. But we'll talk more about that in a second. What I want you to see here, though, is we have this new thing that we've never seen, right? Is that a string? Is that a number? Well, it turns out strings are not the only thing that we have in Python or programming languages in general. They're actually one of many things that we have, the other being integers. Well, what is an integer? Let's actually just show that this is an int. It's not letting me do keyboard shortcuts for some reason. Well, what is an int? Int just short for integer, kind of like str is short for string. But what an integer is essentially just any whole number, right? You can think of ints, let's just say some age, right? Let's say age is equal to 5. If I say age is equal to age plus 1, and then display what age is equal to, I should see 6, right? Integers are essentially used for counting. Maybe if I want to classify, if you think about when we were playing that game, right? If I pull that up again, so if we look here, you could actually see that the moving of the snake actually has these numbers associated with them, integers, that we're using to basically figure out which direction the snake is actually moving in, right? So integers are extremely useful. Integers are probably one of the most useful things that you could have. Strings, I would say, they're definitely useful, especially for processing a lot of information. But just for our applications, we're going to be using a lot of integers. Okay, well, I'm not actually 5. If I really want to be specific, I would say my actual age is 20.687102, right? Associated with how much time I've actually been on this planet, right? In years. Years old, right? So let's just print out age. just show that there's this decimal point associated with it now. And let's actually just look at the type of age, right? Integer is pretty simple. Age, set it to some decimal number, right? If you're not familiar with what a decimal number is, then you might be really young. But really what it is just a ratio between some, let's say it's like 200,000 days divided by 365 days, right? It's just the ratio between these two. It's really what these are. But let's take a look. So this is a float. That is a weird name for a number, right? Float, what does that mean? Well, float is just a decimal, any decimal number, right? You could consider if I take age and I divide it by 5, it will most likely be a float. And if we actually print what that looks like, my keyboard chord shuts are out of whack right now. I don't know why, and my language, but you can see that this is now a decimal number, right? And a decimal number, like we said, is a float. Well, what does this help us do? If you looked at that program that we just ran, you could see that all of these rewards are actually just floats, right? Super important. Why? Because these floating points let us represent really small numbers or really, really big numbers, right? We're going to be more focused on really small numbers, or at least numbers with like precision, right? Floating points, decimal numbers, you could consider them precision, right? If I'm dealing with multiplication, division, right? I want that number to be as accurate as possible. How do I do that? Well, you need to represent them as a ratio, like I said. You need to have them as long as they can in that ratio. Well, okay, we have strings, we have integers, we have floats. Nice. What other types are there? Because there's a lot. Let's not get involved with the other types too much. But one of the main ones that we're going to talk about are Booleans. Booleans. Oh my gosh. What is a Boolean, you might ask? Anything that can be formed as a question. True or false? Right? If you've ever played 21 questions, you're asked a bunch of questions that either have yes or no answers, right? You could think of a Boolean as kind of like, if I'm going to go to the store and I am looking for something very specific. Let's say I am looking for the applesauce. Why, for some reason, they might not have applesauce at the store, I don't know. But they might not, right? So I go to the store clerk and I ask her, do you guys have applesauce? And she's going to tell me either yes or no. Now, if she tells me no, then maybe I have to go to a different store and go buy applesauce there. But if she tells me yes, my day is finished. I can go on building AIs for the rest of my day after I buy my applesauce. And it would have been a completely different day if I didn't have to go to the other store to get the applesauce. You see what I'm saying? So why we would use these is essentially to defer what we do, right? If I'm moving left, I'm not moving right. If I'm moving down, I'm not moving up, right? It's two completely different things that lead to completely different actions, completely different scenarios, right? Okay, bear with me. We kind of just showed these. So let's now come up with a new one specific to me because I'm almost 21. But age 2, we're going to make this a constant. I don't think it'll change anytime soon. And that's going to be 21. So if we highlight, it's a float because we have this little decimal point there that I added in. But you could see the age to drink equal to 21, right? You might ask, how do we use Booleans? Great question. You have all of these guys. We're going to say less than age to drink. What are we saying here? we're basically posing a question. Is age less than the age to drink, right? This is my age. This is the age to drink. Well, let's see. Sorry, buddy. You're too young. and really, what this is doing, right, is if I change this at all, it will change the answer to my question. It's super important to understand because, okay, say instead of age to drink, let's come up with a new little code block and say money in wallet, maybe you're a crypto person, is 25 schmeckles. If you get the reference, great. Cost of a burrito, we're going to say that's equal to 50 schmeckles. So sad. Now, bear with me. Let's say that inheritances and our money in wallet takes a nice substantial increase by 35 schmeckles. So let's do that. Money in wallet plus 35 schmeckles. Little review. We're taking our money in wallet variable that we created here. This becomes 25, right? To the computer's eye, almost. We have this 35, and then we're going to add these two. I'm not really good at math in my head, so don't quote me on what our money in wallet should be, but I'm going to guess it's going to be 70. 60, great. I'm really good at doing math in my head. You can see that based on a small change, and let's highlight that, a small change in the program will lead to an extremely different answer for this question that we're going to pose, right? So if we print the answer to this, it's going to tell us that true. So we definitely have enough to buy a burrito. So what we could say is has enough in wallet. And you don't have to copy my variable names for this. You can make them whatever. I'm just kind of showing you that if he has enough money in his wallet from the tiny bit of inheritance that he got, well, maybe now I could buy a burrito. So let's buy a burrito. Well, there's two ways we could do this. I could just decrease it here, or I could say, okay, if I have enough in my wallet, then we're going to print I can buy a burrito. We're going to buy the burrito, and we're going to show that by saying money in wallet minus equals the cost of a burrito. Now you might be asking, what is this? This is essentially the same thing as this if I change this to a minus sign, right? I know I didn't go over that. Bear with me. I'm then going to print total schmeckles in wallet. I'm going to put this little comma, and then we're going to say money in wallet. Okay, let's actually move this over here. You'll see why in a second. We're then going to say else print don't have enough schmeckles with a little sad face. So we're going to run this twice. One, our inheritance hits. And I could buy the burrito, and then my total schmeckles in my wallet will be subtracted by the cost of the burrito, right? I had the money in wallet was 25. I then had 60 because of the inheritance hit, and now I take out the cost for the burrito. Great. Okay. Well, what if I don't get inheritance? It's been a tough year. I'm down to 25 schmeckles, man. I don't have money to buy a burrito. And it'll tell me that I don't have enough to buy the burrito. If I don't have enough to buy the burrito. Right? So what we did here is we had two possible scenarios. Kind of like the applesauce at the grocery store. We ran the program, and in the case that we had our inheritance, we went down this path. In the case that we didn't get inheritance, we went down this path. Both paths also, though, ended up here. Super important that you also notice that both paths ended up here, because that's kind of how we're going to format things, right? You might consider this, instead of actually buying a burrito, as the direction that the user is moving in, the snake. Is it moving up, left, right, or down? Then we're gonna have some stuff happen here that's dependent on that, right? Dependent variables and all of those things that go into whether or not something is changing can go on inside of a block like this. But then things that need to happen every single time, right? Let's go back and actually take a look at what's going on here. We're moving, but every time we're printing all of this stuff, I don't have 30 blocks in my code telling me when I'm printing that stuff. What I'm doing is essentially having one block to move my snake, and then another block to take the action and give me the reward and give me other information like this. This is a lot to throw at all of you for the first time, but some of the key concepts that I want to go over real quickly before I end this first lesson is that our computer program can have two types of variables. We could have variables that can change and variables that can't change. Other than that, we have these strings. Strings we spent a lot of time on today. There's a lot more that goes into strings. We probably won't cover all of in this tutorial, but you saw that we could do some things with strings that we will need to know and understand, at least to some degree, for this series. Last but not least, we introduced the topics of variables, right? We have strings, which are sequences of characters. We have integers, which can be any type of whole number, right? Maybe you're counting something, maybe you're moving in a direction that's represented by some number. It doesn't really matter, any whole number. And then we have these floats. These floats can be any type of decimal number, right? They could be negative, positive. I didn't mention that here, but these can be negative or positive. And then we have this special type of variable, right? Booleans, anything that can be formed as a question, true or false, right? That is where we engage the power of the computer to do two different things based on some question that we asked it, right? We asked it whether or not our money in our wallet was greater than or equal to, right? Greater than or equal to the cost of a burrito. And if it was, then we bought the burrito. But if it wasn't, we just told the user, sorry, you don't got enough schmeckles. Come again next time when you're not broke. And really, this is probably the most important thing that we did today, which is why I wanted to end on this and also reiterate the importance of this, because we're going to be building off this in the next lesson. If these topics didn't necessarily sit well with you, or if there's anything that you think I should change in the style that I teach, please let me know. I'm open to all suggestions, all comments in the comments section down below. I hope you really enjoyed. I really enjoyed going through all of this. And next time, we'll be building on a lot of the things that we started to introduce here today. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you haven't checked out the paid version of this course, it has a lot more information for all of you to check out if this doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense right away. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Should we